What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here, your host of the Two Growls, One Roar podcast. Let's talk about expectations. I'll call this segment my way too early expectations for the Carolina Panthers heading into the 2024 season. Right before I recorded this, I went out, looked at the Vegas win totals for each of the teams, really focused on the Carolina Panthers. And the Panthers are at the bottom of most of the over-unders, which you would expect, like at the bottom of the league. I think it varies. I've seen 4.5, I've seen 5.5. Looking out here now on this, who am I on? TheLines.com. I don't even know who that is, but TheLines.com has 5.5. New England Patriots, so I guess it sits around 4.5. But the Patriots are the only other team at 4.5. We move up to the Tennessee Titans at 5.5, New York Giants, Broncos, Commanders, Raiders, Cardinals, all sitting around 6.5. Vikings. Talking about the NFC South, New Orleans Saints 7.5, Bucks 7.5, Falcons 9.5. Falcons currently the favorite in the NFC South, the favorite to win the division. But I sat back, and for those that are new to the show or new to the channel, I usually have quite an agenda, right? I sit down, go through a bunch of notes, read up on a lot of things, listen to interviews, take my own notes, decipher and decide. But today, this is a little more freestyle, a little more just me sitting back for a second, thinking about where we are and where we're going. If you had a chance to listen to the last episode, I talked about last season. I've done a summary of the past season. We know this team went through quite a bit of dysfunction. All the voices inside of Bryce Young's head, everything behind the scenes, people, whoever, going behind each other's backs on the coaching staff, going up to David Tepper. You have Tepper and others, Fitter, trying to tell coaches how to coach their quarterback. It was just a terrible season. You have a rookie quarterback, number 1 overall pick, who comes in, gets drafted, put in the situation. And we've got to be honest. When people analyzed and talked about this team last year, they said this was the best situation for a rookie quarterback. Best situation for a coach coming in. Like if you go back and look at all of the vacancies, where those landed and how teams performed, everyone was like, man, the Panthers, this was really before the trade. This is before we traded up for the number 1 overall pick. But people we looked at free agent acquisitions. I bought into it. I keep kind of prefacing my buying into it was the new guy. But it's funny, like looking at it now, because there were quite a few content creators, quite a few podcasts that probably were in a similar boat to me, like where I was last year. For those who know, I mean, I started this and I started, posting on Instagram, my personal page, expanded that. But it felt like the right time to do this when I was like, okay, we're going to get a new coach, going to have a new quarterback, I would assume. And I was like, oh man, the Panthers are going to be heading in the right direction. So I pulled a full Vegas, pushed all my chips in. Last year, I think the Panthers win total projection was like 7 or 7.5. Had to be 7.5 because it sits in the middle. I said, take the over. Take the over. I said, Panthers are going to win 10 games. 10 games. Man, did we go wrong? Did I go wrong? Was what it was. I learned a lot. And so now coming into this offseason, I've kind of talked about the roller coaster journey. And one day I'm going to make a chart of this and I'm going to trademark it because it's mine. I haven't heard anyone else talk about it, probably in similar fashions, but it's still my idea. So I always talk about in the off season ends, you got the team, whoever won the Super Bowl, they're going to be, Mount Everest at the peak. Everyone else kind of depending on where you fell. Like if you just lost in the Super Bowl, you're probably going to be near the bottom. If you made the playoffs and lost, maybe you have time to settle, so you're kind of creeping back up. Your team was knocked out. He was just like, "Oh, I'm glad the season's over." What we see is when you get into the off season, fans are like, "Okay, dust is settled. This is our time," and you start sicking up with free agency. So free agency gets here, gets here, gets here. The NFL draft. I think the NFL draft is the nitrous oxide that the Nas. I remember playing Need for Speed. I'm not a car person, but the Nas that really boost everyone to the top. And I think all fans start on Mount Everest heading into the summer. You're like, let's look at our schedule. We got our schedule release. We've signed X, X, and X. We've signed this, this, and this. We've drafted this guy. Man, we are going to do so good this year. We got whoever we needed. Then things kind of slowly happen. Unfortunately, injuries happen. In the summer, you're like, oh man, guy gets hurt. Get into training camp, into the preseason, and that's where things set up. And last year, I bought into this idea that what was happening in the preseason would not carry over. I pulled a bunch of data and was like, look at the teams that did terrible in the preseason that won in the regular season. And like they won, Kansas City is a really good example of that, in years past. And I'm like, okay, this is going to be okay. We hear from Frank Wright, like, it's going to be vanilla. It's going to be vanilla, but it's okay, right? We're going to figure this out. And the Panthers just never figured it out. I'm still blown away that they never had a lead in the fourth quarter. And they're 2 Eddie Pinheiro field goals away from losing every single game. They were also on the verge of being the first team to only win one game in the 17-game schedule. So still hasn't happened. Luckily, didn't happen to us. We made it through. But it leads us to the point where we are now. In every game that passed, there were moments, kind of, Jacksonville terrible for multiple reasons on the field and off the field. I think about when Wright got fired. I think about Green Bay, the Green Bay game, like that felt like a game where we were going to turn a corner on offense. Knowing that, the staff probably wasn't going to be back with whoever comes in, but still you're like, oh, I just want to see that. I want to see that. We lay an egg. We have a chance, at the end of the season to have our playoff and possibly knock Tampa Bay out of the playoffs, and it just doesn't happen. And you're just like, thank goodness this season is over. Now we get into the offseason, really no expectations. And I like that for this team. Bryce Young is going to be second year in the league. Bryce Young got hit, he got banged around. We've added reinforcements on the offensive line, plus, starting to bring in receiver talent to help him. The defense is stabilized. I like to use stabilized because I don't know that you could say it's improved or that it's technically worse, but it's kind of in the middle, stable with what's happened here. So coming into this now, I like having those no expectations because nobody expects you to win. For me, what does success look like? Like, what are my expectations as a fan? As a fan, I'd love to see us hit the over. Like whether you're taking 5.5 or 4.5, I'll take 5.5. I would love to see 6 wins. 6 wins triples the production of this past season. It possibly means that you're playing some meaningful football down the stretch. Like, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see how the schedule looks. I know we have some difficult games, but you never know how the schedule stacks up. Could be that you have things falling apart. You tougher schedule at the end, or maybe you win earlier in the season. I just want to see us be competitive, and I want to see Bryce take the next step. I want to see the offense start to put up some points because this was one of the worst Panthers offenses in Panthers history. I don't remember where it landed, 13 or 14 points per game. It had to be a little bit over that, but basically the second worst offense in Panthers history. So let's see see some improvements. And I think Dave Canales can bring that to this offense because there were no expectations for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last year. No expectations at all. And we saw what they did. Now, here's the thing. I'm saying as a fan, 6 games would be great as far as my personal expectation. I should say as a podcaster. As a fan, I want us to win every game. I want us to be competitive, and I want us to go out there and compete for the NFC South because I do think we could do it. We made improvements. The only thing that scares me in this division right now is Atlanta, but Atlanta's not shown. They've got a new staff. Tampa Bay is going to have a new offense, right, with Baker Mayfield. You know, they got some stability there. Todd Bowles, great coach. New Orleans Saints, hard to know what they're going to look like. Derek Carr still can't figure it out. So I just am going to take a little bit of optimism right now, but it's not going to be as much as last year. And I think Panthers fans, if you are just a fan, you're like, hey, I'm not a content creator, go out and pump it up, man. Believe the hype. Like, build your own hype. I'll be back here kind of, level set and balancing everything out. But I do look forward to a competitive season. And can we just get back on track to building a winning organization? That's all I want. I just want us to have some winning football. I want us to start looking towards the future and what we can be. And maybe in like a year or two, we are talking about NFC South. We are talking about playoffs. We are making the playoffs. We are bringing back what we have known and keep pounding in the mid 2020s, the early 2000s, so 2020s, 2010s. I know how you pronounce that, but my general thoughts. And I got to say, the stock on Bryce is low. I hear Colin Cowherd saying you couldn't trade him for 2 bagels. Good. It's not like he's going to be traded anyways. But I'm ready to buckle in and see what this team can do. So this is March. This is my March expectations for the Panthers in the 2024 NFL season. I'd love to know your expectations for this team. If you got them, drop them in the comments. Leave a comment. Let me know. What do you think about the over-under? Are we going higher? Are we going lower? How many games do you think the Panthers are going to win? My friends, that's all that I have today. This is Carolina Dad. Y'all have a good one.